much. So my topic today is data culture. I was told I'm the only presenter that's talking about a topic that's not super technical, but I want to show you that it's at least as important as all the technology aspects. And that's why I chose the title From Technical Transformation to People Transformation. Let me start with a number here. We did a survey. BARC is a research institute, so we are a market analyst looking at trends, but also looking at customer behavior. And we are querying people using data and analytics several times a year. And one of those surveys came up with this number. So we asked, do you believe that your business results are significantly improved by by optimizing the handling of data? And this figure is very, very clear. And I want to point out it's not only a little bit better, but it's significant improvement of business results. So I think the idea that data helps, that data is an asset, that you want to become a data-driven company is now very prevalent. We see most companies, especially top executives, not doubting that. Basically, they are creating business strategies that incorporate data, that make sure that they understood that data is one of the most important assets and probably one of the most important strategic differentiators that they actually have. And so we see that many of these strategies are being rewritten or were rewritten in the last years. So often we saw these data strategies, maybe BI strategy in place already for 10 years, but now that changed. Yeah? We have to come up with integrated data and analytics strategies, and they have to make sure that they basically incorporate all the new developments that we are seeing. On the business side, it's the strategic importance of data. On the technical side, it's all developments that we are seeing. Yeah? Better accessibility, the growth of data sources, the growth in heterogeneity of data sources. Yeah? Everyone has now often one or multiple data warehouses, data lakes. Now we are combining that to lake houses. Yeah? But then the cloud systems come up, and often we have now file-based cloud systems. The recent SAP announcement, you've seen that, the data sphere. Yeah? Combining data warehouse cloud with SAC and other systems, starting to be a bit more open. Microsoft Fabric just been announced. Basically, here we have a data lake-oriented concept. Again, a change. Yeah, so everyone that's running data warehouses, data lake houses, now thinking about, what's happening here? Yeah, so Microsoft, as one of the biggest player in that field, is propagating now a data lake-oriented, basically meaning data stored in files, this approach. So a lot happening on the technology side that needs to be incorporated on the data analytics strategies. But now coming to the people transformation, what we see is that these data strategies are typically very shiny. Obviously, they have to describe the art of the possible, what you want to achieve. And then once they are being implemented, there's one frequent thing we are seeing. They meet reality, and reality is often way more ugly than you think when you design and craft your strategy. So often the actual foundation is missing to incorporate or to be successful with a strategy. And there are several reasons for that. Yeah? Often the reason is in the data itself. Sometimes it's in the business, yeah, that you are not thinking far enough in how data can actually be used. But there's one aspect I really want to point out why data strategies fail. So thinking about what is now the biggest problem here, the biggest threat to any successful implementation of a data analytics strategies. When you think about that, it's really the people aspect of it. And the people aspect is represented in the culture of the company. So there's a company culture, and everyone knows that. Yeah? It takes only a few days in a company if you're walking in, if you're a new employee. That takes only a few days, and you start to understand the culture in a company. And part of this company culture is the data culture. And if you don't get this right, your data strategy is basically being eaten for breakfast. Yeah? This is a nice proverb. Many of you might know it. It comes from management literature. It says strategy is eaten, or culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yeah? So any business strategy, if it doesn't fit to your corporate culture, if the people do not accept it, it will basically fail. And the same is true for data. That's why I just basically put data in here, and I think it's just as true. So what is it? What do we mean here? It's part of the company culture. Already pointed that out. But it's about values, beliefs, behaviors. Yeah? So same as company culture. It's all the things that you cannot really describe very well, but that you can just observe, that you see, that you feel. So how are decisions being taken? Is it a hierarchical company or is it very democratic in decision making? All this stuff. So it's really about how processes run, how people interact, how collaboration actually is. And that's based on these things: values, beliefs, behaviors. And it's about data, obviously, here. It's about the effective use of data. So do we achieve the goals that we maybe define in the data strategy? But it's also about the ethical use of data that becomes more and more important, especially now with all the attention to AI, to the things we see we can do with data now. And the European AI Act that basically has been confirmed by Parliament yesterday, that's now coming into a negotiation phase, is also calling for that. Yeah, it's also calling for thinking about ethical use of data. So we want to use that in decision making. We want to use it also in operations, so basically everywhere, and also for innovation. That's the use of data we see, if it is a competitive differentiator, if it's something important that we want to use to improve business results, business benefits in the end. But to be very, very clear, you will never become a data-driven company without a positive data culture. So if the people in your organizations do not embrace data as something positive, that they want to use every day, that they want to use to do what I just laid out, yeah, for decision making, to improve operations, for innovation, then basically you will fail. Yeah? And this is the big gap that we are seeing. So it's really about the people aspect of driving value from data. Now here's the catch. Yeah? You cannot command data culture. Yeah? You cannot stand up as a CEO and tell to your organization, from this day on, we will be data-driven, and you will need to have a positive data culture to embrace data. This will simply not work because, as I just laid out, it's about values, beliefs, processes as they run. It's about myths in the company that's not changing just by commanding it. You cannot buy it. Yeah? So you cannot stand up and say, okay, I hire these expensive consultants, they run through the company, tell everyone how important data culture is, and now then it will change. No. Yeah? You cannot buy it. You cannot turn it on. You cannot just flip the switch and say, well, now we have a positive data culture. We didn't do it before, but now it's turned on. This all will not work. So what can you do? You can influence it. That's the only thing you can do. So you can take measures, you can take actions as an organization to positively influence the data culture, and then it has to develop itself. So that's a big catch because it's not so easy to do. So the question that we get as a market analyst is observing trends, best practice. We are working with lots of organizations how to choose the right technology, how to set up the right architecture, how to build a successful data strategy. But when doing that, all these technology aspects are only one side of the coin. And the other side is really the data culture needs to be influenced. So the big question is now, how can we do that? And here, with this experience of 20, 25 years of doing that, we came up with this framework. We say, if you look at these 6 aspects, if you start to tackle these, if you start to influence these, in the right way, obviously, then you have a good chance that a positive data culture will start to implement, that will start to happen in your organization. And this is basically the output of all that experience, and we use it now for several years, and I can tell you it works very, very well. It helps you to structure your initiatives, it helps you to prioritize, because obviously you can put a lot of money on many different things, but if you agree that data culture is so important in your organization, then it helps you really to start doing something. Let me go very quickly through it. What's in it here? Data strategy. I already had data strategy. I said, well, it's basically the other side of the coin here, but why is data strategy again? It's very simple. There are 2 very important things about data strategy. One is a successful data strategy has to make sure that data culture is in there, that it's influenced, that it's understood. So for example, looking at the 6 or the remaining 5 aspects of this framework should be part of your data strategy. That's one side. The other side of the coin is that you have to understand that the existing data culture in an organization is limiting your data strategy. So you cannot think of super fancy things great stuff you want to do with data, if the organizational reality is that no one is using it, yeah, that you need a long way to actually have people starting to use data, then you have to be very, very much aligned to that and come up with a strategy that's actually working with what you can do in the organizational reality. So be aware of the data culture, how it limits your data strategy, and then you can set up a data strategy that would actually work. That needs data leadership, the second aspect here. We see that in the end, if you want to develop a data culture, you need the backing of the executives, of the management. Yeah? So it needs to be sure that there are enough resources, that the importance is clear, and that at some points you actually have the backing in form that actually things are getting done to really develop data and data culture. If that's not the case, you will have a super hard time. So it's super important to have that. And I tell you one great example here from Germany. If you look at the lower part here in the enablers, data access. Data access is one of them, and to work on data access is super important. Actually has been, in one of our surveys, has been ranked #1 initiative in data culture. So data access, to explain it quickly, means the question, how do we get to the data? Which seems to be very simple, but in reality, it's super hard. Because I'm not only meaning the technical access, and we all know the great tools that we have available for that, connectors and data integration tools and so on and so on, but that's only a very small part of the puzzle here. To be able to have real data access, second step would be you would also have to understand what you get. So you have to get it, you have to understand it. And that now it starts to get harder. If you understand the data, another aspect would be also that you need to actually be informed that it exists. So you have to be aware of the existence. And that's one of the reasons why so many organizations are now investing in data catalogs. Because the only reason is that they understand there's so much data available, but no one knows where it is and how to get to it. So we need technical access, we need an understanding, we need to understand the data, which means we need metadata. We need to have the ability to actually understand what data is available, so some kind of formatting. And that's not even all. So for data access, we need two more things. First of all, we need the skills to actually use the data. So if we have the data now, finally we found it, we understand it, we can use it, it's coming to us in any way, then we need to have the skills to actually use it properly. And that's not even all. We also need to understand the framework in which we can operate with the data. So we need the ethics around it. We need to understand, okay, what do I can do with the data? What do I want to do with the data? So where are my limitations here? What I want to do with it. So a lot of aspects, and that's all data access. And that's one of the most important things here. And that's one of the things most organizations struggle a lot with. Because what the reality is data silos. Having access to data is also part of the power play in organizations sometimes. And often this needs to be broken up. You need to make sure that you can actually access the data as much as possible. We call that also a data access principle called right to know, opposing to a need to know, which is in many organizations present today. Need to know means if I want data, I have to apply for it, basically. I have to ask someone, please grant me access to that data. And that obviously limits our possibilities in getting to data. It's just a hurdle that you need to overcome. What's the other idea? It's the right to know principle. It means all data is available for everyone in the organization. It's a bit of a revolution. I see some of you thinking, hey, how's that working? We have secret data, we have personal information, where again, we need a strong governance. We need to have access and control over some of the data we have. Yes, and you make sure you have that. But that's the exception. So first of all data is available, and then you start to do the exception. Then you separate out, okay, I've secret data. That's something I don't want to have access. So I lock that up. Then I have databases with personal information in it. We all know about GDPR. We want to make sure that this is not very freely available. So at least everyone using it is aware of the rules we have in play for that. So we make sure this is also not just freely available. But that's the exception, and that's not the norm. So we need to turn around this principle. From need to know to right to know. And now here's the interesting fact. if you do it properly, the level of security you have around data will be exactly the same. Yeah? So all important data, all secret data is not freely available, but the overall attitude towards data is completely different. Yeah? Because first, it's open, it's available, you can use it. And that's an atmosphere, that's a culture you want to foster, you want to change. So data silos are prohibiting that, and many people said data silos are actually the biggest prohibitor to digital transformation even. Not only to having or using data, but to digital transformation. If you think about it, there's a lot of truth in that. So breaking up data silos is one of the biggest barriers, one of the biggest things you often want to address. And here now coming back to data leadership, because here leadership has to happen. Yeah? And we have this great example of, in Germany, of Deutsche Post, one of the biggest organizations, 600,000 employees. And they have actually data in their corporate strategy pretty strongly integrated. Yeah? They said, well, we understand that data is there. So data will be the key asset we have to improve our operations, yeah? The delivery we have, yeah? The logistics we need, and so on and so on. So they are very, from a business perspective, they are very clear about the importance of data. And then they see that all these data silos and the lack of willingness to share data is one of the biggest inhibitors they have. So, and then there's this famous speech of Frank Appel, the CEO of Deutsche Post DHL, and he said to everyone in the organization, let me be very clear here. Data is one of the most important assets, is a cornerstone of our business strategy. And we identified that data silos and the lack of willingness to share data is one of the biggest inhibitors we have in our organization. So let me be very clear. Everyone in this organization that's not willing to share data needs to find a new job, period. And that's leadership. And by the way, that was all. There was never any follow-up on that. There was never any formal statement. It was not incorporated in the management contracts, whatever. This was all. And the people we talked to in Deutsche Post that are trying to bring data forward said everything changed from that day on. Yeah? When now they are coming with use cases that need data from different organizational parts, yeah? Suddenly they were able to get it. Suddenly there was this barrier was going down that managers said, no, I will not give you the data. Why should I do that? Yeah? It's not to my personal benefit here. So it actually worked. Yeah? There are many other examples, but it's just a good example of leadership. Second good example would be to lead by example. Meaning leaders in the organization have to show that they are using data. They have to argue their decisions factually. They have to say, well, look, yeah, we looked at this data, it shows this, and that's why we took this decision, and so on and so on. Yeah? So leading by example is also something you want to do. That's why data leadership is so important. Look at data governance. Obviously, data governance is one of the biggest influences here on data culture. Because if you do too strict, yeah, if you put too much regulations around the usage of data, then you will kill data usage. It's as simple as that. Yeah, and that creates a culture of, I don't know, should I use data now? Yeah, maybe I'm in conflict then with one of our regulations. Maybe I get in trouble for that, so I rather not use it. That's a culture we see often, but obviously that's not really helping, yeah, to drive forward and to become a data-driven enterprise. On the other hand, yeah, the lack of enough regulation is ending in chaos typically. Yeah, we saw that in self-service BI that has been adopted over the last 10, 15 years in many, many companies. And if you are not governing it in a proper way, basically ends in chaos. Yeah? Basically everyone doing whatever they like. Then you have this creation of new data models, not in line with anything you can then use to compare it. Yeah, everyone's using their own defined KPIs, which is nice for them, but not for the organization, and so on and so on. Yeah? So it's a fine balance to get. Yeah, with enough regulation on data, so we're not ending in chaos, and we stay compliant and ethical. It's not the same. I want to stay compliant to whatever you have, GDPR, and in a few months you also want to stay compliant to, for example, to the AI Act. On the other hand, you also want to create a culture that everyone's using data, so you don't impose too much regulations on data. And that's the balance everyone needs to find for their business model, for the organizational reality, again, that you have. Let's look at the lower part here. I already talked about data access. Data literacy is part, basically, as I talked about the skills that you need. So data literacy is Yeah, meaning basically you need to skill up the organizational resource. Basically, all the people need to be able to use data, obviously in their specific context. Yeah? So we don't need lots of data scientists everywhere. We just need to make sure that we have enough know-how and enough people with that specific knowledge that we need. Yeah? But overall, in many organizations, there's a lot of upskilling right now going on because there's this awareness, okay, we need this training. And here's maybe one takeaway or one lesson learned is, please, first of all, do not just think about technical training, tool training, and so on. Of course, we need that. Yeah? But that's, again, only one side of the things. Yeah? We need to make sure all the other things that I mentioned, yeah? People being aware how data can actually be used. Yeah? Be actually able to ask the right questions is even more important to be able to use a tool to get the answer. Yeah? To really rethink, okay, this is the process I'm in. What am I actually doing here? And at what point could data help me to be more efficient, yeah, to automate a few things, or to come to a better outcome, yeah, to increase the quality that I have, and so on and so on. And to get people on this change journey, that they start to rethink what they're doing, that they start to think data every day, if possible. That's a change process that takes a while, but it should also be part of the literacy, of the upskilling. And the second interesting observation is that you shouldn't forget the management. And we see that organizations that have put up data academies, big data literacy programs said, well, actually we forgot a little bit of the importance of that. Yeah? So we really make sure that especially the middle management is really data literate in terms that they understand better what data can do for them. Because on one side, often they are not the ones that actually do the strategy, where in many organizations now it says data is super important. And they are, on the other hand, they're also not the users. Yeah, but they're typically controlling the users. And so that's why it's so important. Yeah, and that's why a lot of organizations are now starting management skill trainings that basically explains, okay, yeah, what is data really about? How can we address it? How can we think about use cases that can help us in my specific organization? And so on and so on. So that's literacy. Last is data communication. Often a little bit forgotten, but you shouldn't at all. It's one of the most important aspects. So what is data communication? It's, again, two things. One is make sure that people have the skills to talk about data with data. So we talk about data storytelling here. Yeah, to make we need to skill up people to be able to create great stories with the data they have, the analysis they did. And what's typically missing is to be able to bridge the gap between the analysis of data and the actual business impact. To explain to people in the organization why they should change, why they should use this result of our data analysis to do things differently. That's the biggest gap we are seeing, and we need to be able to overcome that. That means data storytelling, making sure that people are able to use data to actually influence the business. That's one side of it. The other side is to communicate again and again and again about the great things you can do with data. So we see many organizations now starting that with their data culture initiatives, yeah, that they use every available communication channel in an enterprise to reach the employees to talk about data and data analysis. And that really helps. Yeah? So you use the internal communication, you tell stories, you show the success cases, you organize communities. You organize events and conferences where people can collaborate, where they can share their experiences, yeah? Where they can understand what others are doing in the organization, and so on and so on. So it's a big, big communication effort because communication, stories is changing culture. We are talking to humans here. We talk about people transformation, meaning we need to get people to change their behavior. And as humans, we are listening to stories. We are often not really listening to facts. And sometimes we might be listening to orders, but often not really. But what we are listening to is actually stories. Yeah? That's why storytelling is so important, and that's why using communication methods is so important. So in a data culture team in an organization, you definitely should think about having a communication marketing professional being in there to help you to do that. Yeah? To set up internal podcasts, whatever you can think of, but make sure that the story of data is being told in the organization. Super important. And if you look at forerunners in the field, like Swiss Re, like Merck, close to here in Darmstadt, yeah, they're really forerunners, and they really put this often in the center of their initiatives. They say we need to constantly communicate. We need to make sure that our top management is awarding the people that did great things with data publicly. Yeah, so you move people that are successful with data, that have implemented a great use case. Yeah, you put them on a stage. You tell publicly, you did great things here, to basically inspire other people to follow that example, to say, hey, they did good things with data, and it's being acknowledged. Yeah, they get acknowledged then from that. It looks like it's important for our management, so maybe I should take a look also. This is how it's done. This is how to influence the culture. So that's basically the 6 aspects in a nutshell. If you need any more information, just maybe take a look at our website, bark.com, talk to me, whatever. But this really works. We use it now for several years, and it really starts to change data culture in organizations. Just to end this up, a few stats from a survey we did. First of all, we asked about these aspects, and it interestingly is a pretty clear divide what companies start with. They start with strategy, governance, and access, while literacy, communication, and leadership are often not so much addressed at first. We have a question in that survey. We asked basically at the same time, one question later, we asked, what are your biggest obstacles in implementing or improving data culture in your organization? Guess what the people answer? It's actually the lower 3 ones. Yeah? They say the biggest obstacles is lack of literacy, lack of know-how in the organization how to use data, lack of communication and collaboration, and lack of leadership. Yeah, so that was quite an interesting result. So the takeaway is, yeah, don't forget it. Maybe we even enforce the activities around literacy, communication, leadership. And one takeaway, just to also get you in a bit of a positive spirit here, is we asked the people that already did something around data culture, so what positive effects could you actually observe? Yeah, so is it beneficial to invest in data culture? And what you see here, improved decision-making came in number 1. So already half of the respondents said, yes, we achieved that, and even more say, we think we will achieve it. And the second one was here, continuous process improvement based on data. So what we see here is that basically data culture helps on all levels. Yeah, from a decision-making, more strategic or tactical decision-making level, down to every single process where we can help to improve the processes with data. Yeah? So it's really far spanning across all levels of the enterprise. And then I think also quite promising, quite a good number of people said, yes, we see cost reductions, yes, we see revenue growth, the ultimate goal typically when you think about business benefits. And let me end with just one note here. There are 2 topics that are basically moving or driving our industry in data analytics right now. That's the data mesh and the data fabric. Yeah? So that's the newest hot stuff. And the data mesh is basically an organizational concept talking about decentralization. What it means is we want to get rid of these central hubs that really, really slow us down, that are too inflexible, too slow, and are not helping a lot if we want to use data everywhere in the organization, which is often the goal. Yeah, if you want to be data-driven, data has to be used everywhere. So it's about decentralization, meaning domain-oriented ownership of data. It's about data building data products, which is a very beneficial concept. It's about self-serve, so everyone is being able to, for example, to build data products. And then the governance aspect, which is the trickiest part, actually, if you decentralize, usually. The idea is to start to get more federated, yeah? To combine, basically, also central and decentral approaches. So that's the data mesh in a very small nutshell. But if you think about it, if you really want to achieve that, and many organizations started to think about it, started to go to a journey towards the data mesh, then data culture is your key enabler. Because you will never get a decentralization and a federated approach going if you don't have a culture and organization that people are sharing data products, sharing data with each other, and collaborating on that. Yeah? So if you have a company culture that's not really doing that, then you will fail with a data mesh, and that's my personal prediction. Yeah, that many companies started now, but they will fail in a few years because of the lack of data culture. If you want to learn more about that, this is my invitation to you. I run a podcast on data culture. So every week there's an episode where someone tells a story, what they learned, how they were successful, how they overcame challenges. We obviously offer this as a coaching exercise, based on that framework. And I can invite you to an event in September. If you think about data mesh and data fabric, how to implement the latest organizational and technical approaches that support also a data culture, then it's an invitation to join us in Würzburg. Very nice city and good to get to. That was it from me. Thanks for listening in. And I hand it back to you.